Hello and welcome to the first of many videos that I am going to be putting out on my channel about role-playing. Now, some people might not know what role-playing is, or some of you might have a specific idea in your mind when the word roleplay comes up. You might envision fuzzy handcuffs and the bedroom, and you might be like, "Whoa, VT, what are you talking about here?" No. Um, while that is to an extent a form of role playing, the role playing that I'm going to be talking about is specifically making and creating a character and basically pretending to be that character, acting out as if you are that character, making decisions based on what that character would make decisions on. And just building a character and a world around your character. And that's basically what role playing is. It's just basically you with a character interacting with other people who also have characters. There are many games that utilize role playing. There's different formats. You can do written role play, which is kind of forum based in a way. You write one passage and then you send it out into a group of people who are also all role playing, and then they might post their reaction based on their character, and y'all are building a story. Similarly, video games also have a role play community, and that can be anything from making a character on whatever game it is you're doing and then acting as if you are that role play. Some very popular games that utilize a role play sort of environment could be things like Conan Exiles is apparently pretty big on that. Um, you've got, of course, the 5M and the RedM, which is what we're going to basically be focusing on this series, specifically the RedM side of things. There's a lot of other games as well. There's MMOs, which will have roleplay servers, sometimes just dedicated just for people who want to roleplay as their character. I've even seen it on Valheim where you can roleplay as your character on Valheim as well. There's a lot of different options out there for roleplaying, and now more than any time is the best time to get into role playing because it's starting to grow and people are starting to enjoy it and discover it. I'm so here for it, and I hope I can help you get into it as well. This series is going to be aimed at helping people who have no experience role playing. I want to help you get into RedM as easily as possible. I understand it can be very overwhelming to get into any of these role plays when you have no experience, you have no one there to help you. So I'm really hoping that this YouTube series will help bridge that gap that you might be needing. So before we get started with all the fun stuff of making a character and doing all the fun role-playing stuff, I want to make sure that you understand the basics of role-playing. So what are the basics of role-playing? There's a few key terms that you're going to hear a lot on a RedM server, specifically even on ours, the Lost Plains roleplay server. The terms that you're going to hear the most are FailRP, Powergaming, combat logging, metagaming, and RDM. What do these mean? I'm going to jump into each one and explain them one by one so that you can better understand what they are and how to avoid them in your role-playing career. So let's get started, shall we? So FailRP is considered one of the most basic rules of roleplay when it comes to RedM servers. FailRP is pretty much boiled down into you did not act in line with what your character should have done. That's basically what FailRP does or means. It's basically categorizing something that you did that just didn't make sense for the situation. For example, say your character climbed up on the roof of a building, right? Your character should be a little scared of jumping off the building because of injury to self. You know, they might break something, they might be really injured, they might even die, you know, so they might be a little hesitant to jump off. If you were to just jump off carelessly, that might be considered fail RP. But it would definitely be considered fail RP if you were to jump off a building and then sustain no injuries. Like you didn't sprain an ankle or you didn't break a bone or anything. Even though it was a really high building and something should have happened, you didn't. And so that could be considered fail RP depending on how it's portrayed or experienced, right? Another example of fail RP is just getting yourself into situations that your character has no reason to get into. If there's a robbery going on at the general store, you shouldn't be walking up into the general store being like, "Well, hi everybody. How's the weather?" You shouldn't be doing that. You should be afraid of the situation. You should see there's deputies around, and so you should be kind of like hesitating about coming anywhere near this area. If you're not, that's considered fail RP. Does that make sense? Fail RP is just basically anything that you're doing that isn't in line with what's going on or the story, or you just aren't fearing for your life. That can be all considered fail RP. So fail RP is just the easiest solution to avoid having that fail RP title given to you. Is just really think about, what would my character do in this situation? Like, what would actually happen if someone were to do something like this? If you jump off a building, you're gonna have the fear of jumping off and you're probably gonna hurt yourself, right? I use this as an example because it's one of the easiest examples to give. So you basically want to just think as logically as possible as to what it is that will happen as a result of your actions, right? So make sure to read the rules as well. In every server, they will explain to you what they consider fail RP. It's almost always written in the rules what, fail RP counts as. So make sure you're reading those rules carefully. But a basic rule of thumb is just, try and think logically as to what your character would do in a certain situation, and try your best to make it as realistic as possible. And you should be able to avoid the fail RP tag or label as much as possible. The next term that I mentioned was Powergaming. Now, Powergaming can be a little more difficult to explain, so bear with me, please. In literary roleplay, it can also be considered god modding, if you're familiar with that term. Essentially, what you're doing is you are forcing a type of roleplay scenario on somebody without giving them a chance to defend themselves or change the arc of the story at all. They're a part of this story, but you have made it in such a way where they're not allowed to make any decisions, right? And so with Powergaming, it can be very difficult. It's a bit of a gray area when you're taking people as hostage, right? Make sure to read the rules to make sure what you can and cannot do in those certain situations. But when it comes to Powergaming, you want to make sure that you are giving the other person a bit of a say in how the story works. For example, if you were to kidnap someone, hogtie them, and then take them somewhere discreet, away from everywhere, right? That would be fine as long as you're not taking up too much of their time, right? But also, you can't just randomly start torturing someone. I feel like this needs to be stated very clearly because a lot of people across the board don't realize this. You're kind of expected in some instances to be a little understanding that the person that you are about to torture might not consent to certain things that are unchangeable, right? So with Powergaming, you have to be careful that you're not forcing someone to, for example, lose an eye without their permission, because that will completely change their story arc. Completely. And if they're not willing or interested in having that story arc be what they explore, what you're doing essentially is Powergaming them, and that's not fun. No one enjoys having their choice taken away in something where they want to experience it and they want to have fun with it. They don't want to feel as though they're being forced into a situation that they just aren't at all going to enjoy. They don't want their character to lose limbs or get scarred or anything like that. If you do that, that is considered Powergaming and you will be held accountable for that. Power gaming can also be as simple as taking out a stick of dynamite and basically saying you're gonna do exactly what I say or I'm gonna blow us both up. That's also an example of power gaming that you kind of want to avoid as much as possible. It's not fun for anyone because they feel as though there's no wiggle room. It's just is how it is, and there's nothing that can be done or changed. Again, you want to avoid this. Power gaming is not fun for everyone, and so when you're interacting with other people, what you should be having on the back of your mind is how can I make this fun for not just myself but everyone involved in this scenario as well. Even if it's something that's a little more on the not so fun side, like if they're getting robbed, right? That's not going to necessarily be a fun thing, but they shouldn't feel as though they don't have some control or say on certain things going on with their person, right? Which kind of leads me into combat logging. Combat logging is basically rage quitting. I don't know how else to like just make it as simple as and straightforward as possible. It's basically rage quitting. You didn't like how something turned out. You got shot. Maybe you got knocked out. You know, killed, but you're not really actually dead, right? But you know, you got downed and you're just not happy about it, and you're not happy with how the situation turned out. Maybe you were running a gang of people trying to do a robbery and you got caught and you're just mad about it and you decide to just disconnect. That's called combat logging, and it is a form of power gaming because you're basically denying the you're basically denying the situation unfolding as it naturally should because you were upset, and so you're removing your character from the scenario. That is a form of power gaming and it will be held against you. If you get disconnected during a scenario where it's like high intensity, there's a lot going on, right? If you disconnect during that time, you have to let people know. You know, do it through the Discord, let people know in DMs, you know, just let them know, hey, I'm going to try and reconnect, my head popped, whatever, right? And that's also a term that we're going to talk about in my next video. If y'all are sitting here wondering what some of these other terms are in character terms, I'm going to have another video. I'll link it up here when it's done, but it will definitely be a video that comes out talking about the in-game terminology. Head popping is unintentional disconnect. So if that happens to you, just let somebody know that you're coming back and that you're going to finish this scenario. Otherwise, you could be held liable for combat logging, which again is a form of power gaming. You're preventing people from doing something and not giving them that alternative, right? When you remove yourself from the situation. So combat logging is frowned upon in a lot of roleplay communities, so just try not to do it. If you lose, just take the L, add it to your character's repertoire, you know, add it to their story. You could make such a killer comeback story from that. So don't ever think of an L as like an actual loss. Consider it as character fuel for your character going forward, right? So please don't power game. Please don't combat log. Hopefully I've explained it in such a way that y'all can understand and know what those things are and identify them to avoid them in your own roleplay, right? All right, so that leads me to the next term, metagaming. Metagaming is a huge issue. Oh my gosh. So metagaming is basically using knowledge that your character should not have and using that in character. So for example, say one of your friends got kidnapped, okay, in RedM, right? Hopefully not in IRL, but in RedM they get kidnapped, right? And they're telling you this in a DM, right? They're like, whoa, I just got kidnapped, blah, blah, blah. And you're finding out about that out of character. In character, your character has to find out that information in the roleplay. So you can't just load into RedM with this knowledge that your friend just got kidnapped, right? Because that's information that's outside the server. We expect you to not act on that information until you find out about it in character, right? Like you load in, then you're looking around for your friend like, hey, where's my friend, blah blah blah, and then like a doctor's like, oh, you didn't hear, they got kidnapped, blah blah blah, and then that's when you're like, that's when your character knows what has happened, right? But you couldn't have acted on that knowledge before your character found out about it in character, because that's metagaming. Metagaming can be very difficult to balance sometimes, especially if you want to watch people stream RedM. A lot of servers have made it so that if you're in someone's stream, you are expected to stay. You can either stay in the stream and just watch, or if you're going to log into the server, you have to leave the stream because they're worried. A lot of servers worry that you might be using the information found out on that stream as knowledge for your character to know, right? So you want to avoid metagaming as much as possible. You want to make sure that all the knowledge that you have outside of your character stays outside your character until your character learns about it in character. Does that make sense? I know a lot of these words can be a little overwhelming for newer players, people who are not as used to role-playing. So if you have any questions, or if there's anything in this video that I didn't cover very well, make sure to put it in the comments down below. But I do have one last word for you. It's actually an acronym. We call it RDM. So what is RDM? What does it stand for? It actually stands for Random Death Match. And it basically means that you started a fight where you expected somebody to die, but you did so in such a way where it's completely random. Like, there was no initiation for it, there was no branch being snapped, there was no camel back being broken, you know, like nothing happened. It just random violence happened. Violence randomly happened. So that's what RDM means, is basically someone has initiated hostile action on someone, like with the intent to kill their character, or their character ends up getting killed, you know, sometimes that happens. But there was no initiation, there was nothing to indicate that this was what was going to happen. It just randomly happened. So that's why we call it RDM, Random Death Match. And so to avoid this, what you really want to do is make sure you are speaking loud enough in game to let somebody know that you're about to take hostile action against them. You need to let them know that that's what's going on. You can't just randomly pull a gun out on them and shoot them. You have to let them know. And so make sure to read the rules closely in whichever server you're in to figure out what their definitions of RDM are, because everybody's different. But typically speaking, if you're planning on shooting somebody, if they don't cooperate with your demand or whatever is going on, you need to make sure you let them know. It's almost like standing your ground in a way. You have to speak it, you have to verbalize it and say, if you do XYZ, I will shoot you. Pretty straightforward. So RDM can also count towards doing violent crimes towards the NPCs. We call those locals. If you do a violent attack on them, that's considered RDM, because most times they don't bother you. You have to like really annoy them for them to try and attack you. So you just want to make sure that whenever you're initiating some sort of conflict, that there is verbalization happening, and that everybody who's involved can hear you while you're verbalizing it as well. Otherwise, if you're just randomly pulling a gun out and shooting people, that's going to be RDM and you're going to get in trouble, and you don't want to do that. As a side note, we also have a separate subclass for vehicle murdering things, and I think that's just literally like VDM, like vehicle deathmatch. Like, yeah, it literally is just the concept of you randomly running people over with your wagon or your horse. You're not supposed to do this. With vehicles, you have to be careful. Just make sure you're, you know, when you're in town, you're riding at a very slow pace and that you're not going to run people over. You just want to make sure that you are playing your character as logically as possible and making sure that whatever they do is appropriate and a good reaction for what is happening in the world around them. If you ever have any questions about certain scenarios or things that you can and cannot do, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. And also, come join the Lost Plains Discord. We have a whole section that you can post your questions about certain scenarios and any questions you might have about the game itself. We'd be more than happy to help you. Links down below in the description box. So that's about gonna do it for this video. I hope that this video helped you out with some of the more basic terms that you're gonna run into when you're reading the rules. My next video is probably gonna be about the in-game words that you're gonna hear. What does in-county mean? What does it mean to have a head pop? What does it mean to, look through my eyes? I don't understand what these phrases mean. If that's you, don't worry. The next video I have waiting for you will be about all of that. And that'll be coming to you real soon. I hope you did enjoy this video. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe for more, because we're going to be doing many more of these little tutorials for y'all to send to your friends, anybody that you're interested in introducing into the world of RedM. We'd be happy to welcome you to the wild, wild west. Yeehaw! And I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Bye bye.